Howdy again, and I'm Chris Barecki with the Arkansas Society of Freethinkers, and we are recording this meeting so we can post it on YouTube later. The Arkansas Society of Freethinkers is a nonprofit organization devoted to the separation of religion and state, toward advocation of the scientific and humanistic viewpoints, and improving the lives of non-believers. Our usual agenda is for me to announce where the restroom location is, but you'll have to figure those out for yourself. And then time for our standard disclaimer. ASF is a diverse organization with members who represent a wide range of opinions. The speakers who present at our big meetings do not necessarily represent the views of ASF or its individual members. Because we are a 501c3 organization, ASF cannot directly support candidates for public office, but we can advocate for causes such as separation of church and state, scientific literacy, societal progress, and truthful communication. With that said, at this point in our meetings, we usually get started with a free thought of the day, which is something to sort of settle us down, put us in the proper intellectual frame set, and get us all to the point where we can fully absorb the messages of today. And I'm sure that Byrne has something completely goofy instead of something that does that, but today's free thought of the day is to be done by Byrne Bradley.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Very good. They're just checking the audio. A friend of mine named Dick Price did talk radio in Little Rock for 25 years, spent most of his life from about 16 on in radio. Interviewed Bill Clinton more times than he could count, interviewed Hillary Clinton a lot, and in fact confessed on the air to having a lustful appreciation of her, which she just laughed about. But as First Lady of Arkansas, he was interviewing her one time and said, "Hillary, I have to ask you a question, and you may not like it, but I think we all deserve an explanation." And she says, "What is that?" He says, "You have to explain the gays." And she said, "I really don't want to talk about that." And he said, "I think the intelligent people of the state of Arkansas, especially your feminist friends, deserve an answer. Explain the gays." And she says, "Well, it's like this. When you're with someone, as long as I've been with Bill, he can get a little boring. And if you're hearing his speech for the 75th time and you're standing on stage, you kind of have a choice. You can just pick your nose. You can look out in the crowd and wave to people you know, but then it looks like you're not paying attention. Or you can just turn to him and gaze lovingly at him. And so I have chosen the gaze." And that is exactly what he was asking about, because several feminists had called him and said, "You have to ask her why she just gazes lovingly at him when he rambles on and on with something that sometimes she doesn't agree with." And so if you thought at the beginning of this that I was talking about something else, then you needed to listen to the rest of it before you made a decision. And that's the free thought of the day.
Thank you, Byrne. We will try to listen to the whole story before making decisions. Next up, when we're meeting in person, we can, in normal times, we can shake hands and hee-haw and tell stories and everything like that. And we would usually have a break in our meeting to do exactly that. Here on Zoom, and nicely socially distanced on the order of miles, we can just tell everybody where you are. So in the chat, if you could, type in where you're from or where you're living now. You can optionally type in where you're originally from if you're not from the place you are now. But that just gives folks an idea of where everybody is, and that way we can actually use the chat function. I'm in North Little Rock. While y'all are doing that, I'm going to introduce our speaker for the misinformation of the month, and that will be Don Guerra, who will be telling us about Shakespeare, right?
Yes, yes, we're going to talk a little bit about Shakespeare today. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm introducing myself here. I'm Dawn Guerra, and I, just to kind of give a little history of where I'm coming from, I was raised Roman Catholic. And when I say I was raised Roman Catholic, I was raised Roman Catholic. My parents sent me to a Catholic school for 12 years of my life, graduated from Catholic school. And through all those 12 years, it was doled into our heads of certain mythologies that we could believe. We could believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the fairy tale of the Tooth Fairy. And that was okay to find those silly when you got old enough. But the other mythology, no, couldn't do that. It was so drummed into our heads that there were certain venues that were taken. We were told that the New American Version of the Bible was the only one that was valid. That was the U.S. American language from the Vulgate. Okay, that was all that we needed to know, and we needed to stay away from that King James Version. That was a bad thing. We were told, as you know, in our theology classes, we were told, number one, that it was missing books. Those people didn't have it all straight. And then it was incorrectly translated. And as I was growing up, I was told the entire King James Version was translated by William Shakespeare. Now, as a kid, I just sort of accepted that, didn't question it. But as I got a little bit older, I thought, well, that's interesting. Let me do some investigation. Now, one thing I think we all know, William Shakespeare loved to put his mark on everything he did. Pretty much everything that you see of his, somewhere you can find where he has put his mark. And that's kind of where we're getting to. When the King James Version began to be translated, William Shakespeare was 46 years old. Now, if you actually go to the 46th Psalm and read the 46th word in, that's the word shake. And then if you come from the back and read 46 words in, then you come up with the word spear. William Shakespeare, it is claimed, put his mark on the King James Version of the Bible. Now, when the Bible was translated, it was actually done by a consortium of scholars with a deeply needed knowledge of Latin and Greek. Shakespeare didn't have that. But it is never doubted that he might have been asked to polish up some of those passages. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least if he decided to polish up that 46th Psalm and put his name on it. Did he write the entire scripture? No. Did he put his mark on it? I'll let you decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Well done. That was funny.
I thought so too. You're welcome.
You're going to make me read the Bible. Anyways, next up is our member story, which is sort of a personal experience story, maybe something that you have in common with the speaker. And our speaker for that is going to be Betsy. And have at it, Betsy.
So I'm taking you back 25 years to my at that time, 4-year-old only son at that point. His little brother and bane of his existence had not come along yet. He's in daycare because I work full time, his father works full time, and that's just the way it is. So it is December. He's 4 years old, and it's after lunch. And one of the teachers decides to read to the whole class, rather, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Now, 4-year-olds are very concrete in their thoughts. They don't deal with fantasy that well. So he listens to the story and he interrupts and starts telling her, no, reindeers don't fly, because he's seen National Geographic. And he's going, no, no. And finally he says, that's a lie. My mama says it's bad to lie. Teacher was not having any part of this. He goes into timeout for the whole rest of the day until I come to pick him up. He has got tears streaming down his face. He is angry, red in the face. And so is the teacher pretty much, because this kid called her a liar in front of the class of 4-year-olds. We changed his daycare shortly after that. But what happened within a week is, number one, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer died. He was dead and buried, never to be resurrected. Because little kids are concrete, and this is a domino effect, Santa Claus also died that week. And because one invisible, all-knowing, all-seeing person is dead, so goes the next one. God also died that week. So now I am stuck with moving a atheist 4-year-old to a new daycare and explaining to the new daycare teacher that he does not believe in Santa Claus, but he's been told to keep it a secret. His secret is just between him and Mama that Santa Claus is dead. And he's been instructed to please, please do not tell anybody in the state of Arkansas that God is dead. The end.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you, Betsy. All right, for the introduction to our feature presentation, our main speaker for today, I'm going to hand off the introduction to the infamous in some circles, legendary in others, Ann Orsi.
Okay, I am here to introduce Allie Taylor. Allie got her start in abortion advocacy when she was 14, when her mom took her to an anti-abortion rally. They were among the counter protesters. And ever since then, she has been a very staunch advocate for safe, legal abortions. She grew up in Fairport, New York, and came to Little Rock in 2009. She's one of the co-founders and presidents of, and is currently president of, the Arkansas Abortion Support Network. Her other co-founders are Roz Creed and Karen Music, who are also here today. Allie's been a clinic escort for the last 7 years, and along with the other members of the Arkansas Abortion Support Network board members and volunteers, she's been raising money to help Arkansans pay for their abortions since 2016. She enjoys hiking, binging favorite TV shows, and hanging out with her senior kitty, Stella, which means, you know, she's one of us. Please welcome Allie.
Hi, Ann, thank you so much. And big thanks to Arkansas Society of Freethinkers for having me speak today. And I have a fairly meaty presentation. I'm going to talk about Arkansas Abortion Support Network. I'm going to give you a bit of our history and talk about the work we do. Then I'll share some stories from patients that we've helped. And then I'll talk a bit about what's going on in the legislature and the courts and how upcoming decisions may impact Arkansans. And lastly, I'll wrap up with information about how you can get involved. Before we dig in, though, I would like to recognize Roz Creed and Karen Music and mention that they are joining us today. They are my co-founders, and together Roz and Karen make up the backbone of AASN. And I'll say it again a little bit later in the presentation. We couldn't do what we do without Karen and Roz. And I would like to, I have a pretty, it's not real deep, but I do have a bit of a presentation that I would like to share. It's just some slides with some information that will supplement what I'm talking about. Can everybody see my screen now with the slide that has Arkansas Abortion Support Network and then a bunch of our web presence? Okay, wonderful, thank you. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we've been. A little more than 7 years ago, Karen, Roz, and I met at a Planned Parenthood Lobby Day event. Later that same year, we all volunteered as patient escorts at Little Rock Family Planning Services during the annual anti-abortion protest event called 40 Days for Life. Some of y'all may be familiar with that campaign. It's a bunch of Catholics coming out to the clinic to yell at people having abortions. It's not just Catholics, but it is a Catholic organized and run event. And at that time, the clinic was only using escorts during those 40 days campaigns. They started out being held once a year, and then they were upped to happening twice a year. So for those times, all volunteers were referred to the clinic via friends of other volunteers. And while Roz and Karen and I kept going back during that 40 days campaign, we became aware that there are protesters at the clinic on most weekends and even during the weekdays. Protesters were not just a problem during the 40 days campaigns. So we asked if we could keep going back on Saturdays, and I offered to take over the scheduling and organizing of the clinic escorts, which the clinic administrator was happy to hand over those duties. And word really started to spread. Volunteers were referring their friends to us. And after several months, it became obvious that we needed to formalize things a bit. So we developed a name for the organization, and that was Arkansas Clinic Escorts, or ACE. We created a logo, and we tabled for the very first time, publicly introducing ourselves to the world at the 5th annual Rally for Reproductive Justice that was held in January of 2015. We talked to so many people about clinic escorting, and we signed up so many new volunteers. And shortly after that, we held our first formal in-class training session for new volunteers. And I can't even, gosh, the memories are almost a whirlwind at this point of how we started growing. So after we took over the escorting program, and then we were there every weekend, we became aware of the need for an abortion fund in Arkansas. At the time, there was no fund that was established to help just the people of Arkansas. So we decided to start a fund. And I frequently joke that we were too stupid to think we couldn't do it, so we did. And we developed the umbrella organization of Arkansas Abortion Support Network, and that houses ACE, the clinic escorting program. And that also houses our abortion fund, which we named Abortion Services of Arkansas, the acronym for which is ASA. And it may tickle some of you to know that we did that on purpose, naming our abortion fund with an acronym that spelled ASA. So we also have a community outreach and education arm. AASN was incorporated with the state of Arkansas on April 28th of 2016. And on June 17th of that year, we held our first public event and fundraiser. And that was at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock, which I understand y'all also have a very lovely relationship with. At that event, we screened the documentary Trapped. And our goal really was just to raise enough money to cover our application for our IRS nonprofit status. But holy cow, y'all, thanks to the generosity of our early supporters, we raised more than double what we needed for that nonprofit application. And that meant we were able to start a modest abortion fund almost immediately. On July 7th of 2016, we officially became a 501c3 nonprofit, and we've been funding abortion for Arkansans ever since. Early on, we decided that we would fund Arkansas patients going to independent clinics. It's really, really important to understand the difference between Planned Parenthood clinics and independent clinics. Like a lot of folks here, I assume, everybody at AASN is an individual supporter of Planned Parenthood. We support their work, we donate occasionally. Planned Parenthood does so much important work on top of the healthcare services they provide, like lobbying services and organizing services. When we considered the well-established funding stream that Planned Parenthood has, we decided we wanted to focus on the clinics that don't get all the attention, the clinics that do not receive waves of donations every time a legislator introduces a horrific abortion bill or says something stupid. It's so important to know that here in Arkansas, the one independent clinic that exists, which is Little Rock Family Planning Services, they provide the majority of abortions in the state. The Planned Parenthood in Little Rock does provide medication abortion, but that's only available through 10 weeks. So if a patient is past the 10-week point, or if they're under 10 weeks, but they just would prefer to have the procedure rather than a medication abortion, those patients must go to Little Rock Family Planning Services or to some other clinic out of state. It's also important to know that if you combine all the independent abortion clinics in the country, they provide the majority of abortion each year versus Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is the big name, they're well known, but it's independent clinics who are taking on the bulk of actually providing abortion. So we support independent clinics. Over the last roughly 6 years, we've held lots of fundraisers, including comedy shows and silent auction. That was all in the before COVID times, of course. Our volunteer base has grown from a handful of folks to about 20 or 30 regular volunteers and lots of folks who volunteer occasionally when they can. Our donor and supporter base has grown immensely, but so has the need for our help. And we always need more help, and I will talk about that a little bit later. But after all this time, we are still an all-volunteer organization. Everybody does the work in their free time, nights and weekends, or for retired folks, they are able to get a lot done during the day. That means we are so incredibly lucky to have 2 retired ladies handling a lot of our day-to-day duties of clinic escorting and fund administration. Those 2 retired ladies are here with us. As introduced earlier, Roz Creed and Karen Music. Karen is out of the clinic providing escort services and field training for new escorts almost every day. This is a big job, and we can always use more help with escorts. We are holding a virtual training class for new escorts next Sunday, January 23rd, and I will share more info about that a little bit later on in the presentation. Roz is our fund administrator, and she talks to people in need of help paying for their abortions every day. She manages our fund and ensures that everyone who's eligible gets help. And we always need help raising money for the fund. We will have new volunteer opportunities for fundraisers and event planning very soon. And that information will be coming out through our mailing list. Real quick here, I'm going to put the, if I can get back to, I am going to put the, says me, I was going to put the, pardon me, the link to our mailing list in the chat. I will do that after I stop sharing my screen. I'll do that at the end of the presentation. At any rate, let's see, now that I've talked about Roz and Karen and what they do, and I just can't say it enough that AASN could not function without Roz and Karen. Now I'd like to share a few stories about the people we help. This is a collection of stories from AASN clients and people that we have escorted at the clinic. We do have permission to share these stories, and names have been changed, as always, to protect privacy. First, I'll start with Monique's story. She's young, single, and serving in the military reserves. The man who impregnated her is not in the picture. She thinks about adoption, but she can't imagine carrying her pregnancy, giving birth, and giving her child to someone else. She spends a lot of time thinking about all of her options. She knows she cannot take care of a child right now, and she knows that she cannot deal with the pain of placing a child for adoption. She
Allie,
knows.
I'm sorry, did you change slides? We're still seeing the first slide.
It is, and then I don't
Okay.
have, I only have 3 slides. Thanks. Um, so Monique knows that abortion is the right decision for her, and she doesn't regret it. And this is Jada's story. In her late 20s and struggling to take care of 3 children, she is living in a motel because she recently escaped her abusive partner. Her abusive partner who raped and impregnated her. She will not bring another child into the chaos. She knows abortion is the right decision for her and the children she is already taking care of. And this is Dina's story. After months of excitement about her pregnancy and making all the plans that expectant parents make, her fetus is diagnosed with limb-body wall syndrome. This rare and serious condition is not compatible with life. Dina makes the heartbreaking decision to end her wanted pregnancy, to spare her baby from suffering, and so that she may begin grieving on her own terms. So one of the things that we see or that we hear a lot from folks that we help is that they have experienced judgment from family or friends, or they are afraid of judgment from family or friends, so they haven't shared their story or their need with anyone. And of course, folks obviously experience judgment at the hand of protesters as well. But we do have one story that shows that sometimes it is not friends or family or even protesters who heap judgment on a person who needs an abortion. Sometimes it's other medical professionals. And this is Lisa's story. She is pregnant and struggling with the thought of bringing another child into the world. She makes an appointment at Little Rock Family Planning Services. During her ultrasound, they determine that Lisa has had a miscarriage. That means she can go to her personal OBGYN for miscarriage management, and she can have the cost covered by insurance. Super important here to note that pretty much everybody who gets an abortion pays out of pocket for a variety of reasons. But in this instance, Lisa would be able to go to her OBGYN and have miscarriage management covered by her insurance. But when she visits her OBGYN and tells the story of her appointment at the abortion clinic, her doctor does nothing but pass judgment on her. Her personal OBGYN refuses to provide miscarriage management because she considered an abortion. Now, Lisa has to go back to Little Rock Family Planning Services, deal with the protesters, and pay out of pocket for a procedure that she should have been able to get at her doctor's office. Now, those stories were a combination of stories that patients write for us and stories that I have heard from other escorts. But I'd like to share 2 of my own stories of working and interacting and observing patients at the clinic. Many years ago, before the creation of AASN, while we were still just escorting, I was at the clinic, and on that day there were many, many protesters. It was some kind of special campaign, and there were a bunch of people from out of state along with a lot of our regulars. So it was a huge group. A young woman came to the clinic with her mother, and that young woman had a soft cast on her left forearm. Her mother was extremely vocal and had a brief shouting match with the protesters. The young woman was quiet, and she really appeared to want nothing more than to be anywhere else. She was stoic and determined. After her procedure, when a nurse walked her out to her mother's car, the protesters ramped up their hateful rhetoric just like they do when anyone enters or leaves the clinic. And as I stood there, holding an umbrella in an effort to block the protesters' view, I watched the nurse help the young woman into the car. And the nurse leaned forward and spoke softly to the young woman, saying, "Now you stay away from him, okay, honey?" The nurse gave her a small hug and buckled the young woman's seatbelt. And at that moment, my heart broke and it swelled at the same time. I felt so honored to bear witness to this moment of kindness and support. And I felt outraged that behind me, callous and uncaring people were yelling about how this young woman was a murderer and would regret her decision forever. The contrast between the nurses' kindness and care versus the despicable behavior of the protesters will stay with me forever. And finally, I have a story about a young couple who visited the clinic earlier this year. The day I met them, they were there for her first appointment. When they arrived, there weren't any protesters at the clinic, thankfully. And after checking in, the husband came back to their truck because during COVID, only patients are allowed inside the clinic. So this young husband sat in their truck waiting. While he was waiting, several protesters showed up, and these were the types of protesters who like to stand in the driveway to stop all cars coming and going from the clinic. I checked in with the young husband to give him a few pointers for leaving the clinic while protesters are blocking the driveway. After a few minutes, he started talking about his wife and the difficult decision they were facing. They had a new baby. She had just given birth less than a year ago. She also recently lost her job due to the economic impacts of COVID, and his small cell phone business was not picking up after being hugely impacted by a COVID decline. Not only was this second pregnancy very hard on her body, it was already causing her a lot of health issues, but they had no idea how they would support a second child. And really, on top of that, they weren't even sure how they would pay for an abortion if they ultimately made that decision. After listening and reassuring him that they were not alone, I told him about the abortion fund and I gave him my card. And he literally could not believe that there was help available for them. He teared up and thanked me for being there and offering help. And he even asked why the protesters aren't working with us and actually helping people. This young couple, who only wanted to be able to care for the child they have, were devastated knowing they could not care for a second child. But they were relieved to know that if they did decide to have an abortion, they wouldn't have to shoulder the financial burden alone. And the relief I could feel from them was palpable. And those are just a few stories of people who needed abortions. There are so many more, and each story is unique and personal. And behind all of those stories is someone that we were able to help. Now, I'd like to talk about the future. And to be frank, the future is so uncertain right now. I'm sure you're all familiar with Texas's SB 8 bill, which banned abortion after fetal cardiac activity can be detected, which is around 6 weeks of pregnancy. This law has been in effect since September 1st, and it has had a huge impact on Texans seeking abortion services. And it has impacted people in border states too, because all the clinics in border states, and frankly, all around the country, are working, in some cases, literal overtime to absorb the influx of patients from Texas. And especially in border states, including Arkansas, in a lot of instances, people, both Texans and border state residents, are having to schedule their procedures weeks later than they would prefer because these clinics are working so hard to absorb the extra volume. Excuse me. So along those lines of the Texas ban, you're probably all also aware that Arkansas's very own Senator Rapert, boo, he vowed to file a similar bill and pass it during this legislature's year-end special sessions. That would have been at the end of last year. Luckily and frankly, shockingly, the Arkansas state legislature declined to take up any new issues during their last special session. The purpose of the special session was to address Governor Hutchinson's tax cuts, which, I mean, that also wasn't a great thing, but they would have had to, all agree to take up any, well, 2/3 of them would have had to agree to take up any additional issues. And Rapert did not get that vote. The legislature as a whole said, nope, we're dealing with the tax cuts and then we're going home. So that was such an immense relief at the time. but I think we can be pretty confident that that relief won't last for very long. The upcoming session of the legislature, which starts on February 14th, that's a Monday. It also happens to be Valentine's Day. It's an interesting date. But that session, the 2022 legislative session, starts in February, and as is the structure of Arkansas State's legislature, even numbered years are slated to be strictly financial sessions, fiscal sessions. They're supposed to focus strictly on budgetary issues. We can certainly hope, and we are hoping, that they stick to budgetary issues and don't spread any further into other social issues. But I have personally feel that there's no reason to believe that Rapert won't try to get abortion bills brought up. I apologize, I don't know the exact procedural hoops that he'll have to jump through, if he has to get another vote to have legislation approved to be brought up, or if he can just do it. But either way, I think that we can be confident that Rapert will do anything he can to introduce anti-abortion bills during this session, which starts in February. You may also be aware that the Supreme Court heard the case of Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban on December 1st. We expect a decision in that case this summer. So both of these issues, the possibility of a Texas-style abortion ban in Arkansas and a ruling from the Supreme Court on the Mississippi ban, both of those could have a huge impact on abortion access in Arkansas. If Senator Rapert has his way, abortion would be completely outlawed in the state. We know that's his ultimate goal. As for the Supreme Court and Mississippi's 15-week ban, there are a few different ways the court could rule. Most observers believe that the court will, at minimum, uphold the law. But there are a few different ways that could go. It could be a very narrow ruling, and the Supreme Court could say, this only applies to Mississippi's 15-week ban. It only applies to the legislation that Mississippi has passed. Or the Supreme Court can make a broad ruling saying that, okay, the limit is now 15 weeks instead of being viability, which is what Roe upholds, that states cannot ban or severely restrict abortion after the point of viability, which is typically considered about 24 weeks. So a 15-week ban would be a huge restriction compared to what we have now with Roe. So the court could say, okay, yep, we find in favor of Mississippi's ban, and we're going to rule broadly and say that anybody can enact a ban at 15 weeks. There's also a chance we have to prepare for the possibility that the court could take the opportunity to completely overturn Roe and basically say, okay, this case has given us the opportunity to revisit the entire framework of Roe, and we're throwing it out. And in that instance, states would then be able to completely outlaw abortion, or put in, if they decide not to completely outlaw it, they could put in all kinds of other restrictions. One of the things to know about those potential decisions, if the court does a broad ruling but sticks just to the 15 weeks, then that would likely mean, I don't know if it would be immediate, but it would be very quick. There's an 18-week ban in Arkansas, in this state, that was passed several years ago. Right now, Arkansas's gestational limit is 20 weeks. So you can get an abortion up to 20 weeks in Arkansas. But several years ago, an 18-week was passed, but that law was blocked before it could ever go into effect. However, if the Supreme Court upholds Mississippi's 15-week ban and says, okay, the line is now 15 weeks, then Arkansas would be able to enact that 18-week ban pretty much immediately. There's also the fact that if the Supreme Court decides to completely overturn Roe, or if they uphold the 15-week ban and legislatures view this as a complete overturning of Roe, There are many states, Arkansas included, where abortion could become illegal almost immediately. Arkansas has what's known as a trigger law in place, and that means that if the Supreme Court overturns Roe, abortion would become illegal basically right away in Arkansas. Pardon me. So, like I said, clearly there's a lot of uncertainty, and we need to be prepared for the possibility of an outright ban here in Arkansas, or at minimum, a severe curtailing of the ability to get abortion after 18 weeks or after 15 weeks. So there's a lot we don't know, but what we do know is that AASN isn't going anywhere. As long as abortion is illegal somewhere in this country, AASN will continue helping Arkansans to access abortion. We are preparing for the very real possibility that we might have to help most or even all Arkansans in need of abortion to leave the state to access care. As it is, we already help patients go to clinics in other states. For example, for a lot of folks in Northwest Arkansas, it's a lot easier to go to Tulsa than it is to go to Little Rock. And generally speaking, when a patient is past the state's 20-week gestation limit, they must leave the state. So that brings me to the question, what can you do to help? Well, as I'm sure that a lot of you can probably guess, and especially those of you who are closely tied to running a 501c3, our primary need is always going to be money. On the next slide that I'll get ready to show over here, I'd like to share a fun and I think mutually beneficial way to support AASN financially. You can buy this book that is now I'm showing on my screen. It is called Escorting for Jesus: Why Religious Fundamentalists Need to Crawl Back into Their Caves. And this book was written by a former board member of AASN. And when she lived in this state, she was one of our star escorts. Her name is Leanne Bennett. She moved to Oregon last year, and we miss her dearly. But this is one of the ways in which she's still helping us. All the proceeds from the sale of this book go directly to AASN. It's a really great quick read, and I think a lot of y'all in particular would enjoy it. If you're interested in purchasing it, you can scan the QR code that's on your screen right now with your phone's camera, and that will take you to the Amazon listing. If you prefer not to support Amazon, and I know, I totally understand and supportive of that, but this book is available on a few different platforms like Barnes & Noble, and you can just Google Escorting for Jesus to find it on other platforms. But that is, like I say, probably one of the more fun ways you can help us out financially. I really can't say enough about the book. It's extremely critical of religious fundamentalists and their views on abortion, and I think y'all would get a kick out of it. Okay, I'm gonna just go on to our next slide, and let me know if anybody needs any more information about this book, Escorting for Jesus. But going on to our next slide, if you are of the cash donation inclination, you can scan this QR code that will take you to the donation page on our website. We accept donations via credit card, PayPal, or ActBlue. And really, whether it's $5 or $50 one-time donation, or whether you're able to make a $5 or $10 monthly commitment, literally every single dollar counts. As I mentioned, being an all-volunteer organization, which that does have its drawbacks, and it's not really good news, but that's a whole other topic. The vast majority of donated funds do go directly towards helping people pay for their abortions. And we do have volunteer opportunities, of course. As I mentioned, we have training for new clinic escorts for folks who are interested in clinic escorting coming up next Sunday, the 23rd. And that'll be from 2 o'clock to 4 p.m. via Google Meet. If you are interested in joining that training, send us an email at contact@arabortionsupport.org. And we're looking for help in some other areas as well. I'm developing some volunteer applications for these different roles, but we are going to be recruiting for event planners, folks to staff events when we're able to do in-person events again, fundraisers, and we're also looking for help with technology and social media. So keep an eye out for the information on those. Like I said, I will put a link where you can sign up for our mailing list into the chat just as soon as I wrap up. I did want to mention as well, as a lot of you know, or I'm sure you know, the anniversary of Roe v. Wade is coming up on Saturday, January 22nd. In past years, an organization that we are members of and that freethinkers have been longtime supporters of is an organization called Arkansas Coalition for Reproductive Justice. Typically, they would hold a rally at the Capitol to commemorate Roe. However, because of COVID insanity, we are holding a virtual event this year, and that event is going to be held on Saturday, January 22nd. So it's this coming Saturday, and it'll be at 4 p.m. And I apologize, I don't have links or a lot of information about the event right now. I know that we will be streaming on Facebook. Representatives from ACRJ and AASN, and I think a few other organizations will be talking about abortion and reproductive justice, and we'll be answering questions from people watching. So as soon as I do have the link and all the formal details for that event, I will forward those on to Anne, and I will also post details in the Freethinkers Facebook group so that all y'all can get that information. And again, so the two upcoming events are the Roe commemoration this Saturday, January 22nd at 4 o'clock, and we will be doing clinic escort training on Sunday, the 23rd at 2 o'clock, and everything's virtual at this point. So that is it from me. I thank you so much for having me. Really, really big thanks to the Freethinkers, and I'm happy to take any questions. And Roz and Karen are also able to answer questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Allie. Does anyone have questions?
I'll say
Yes,
that.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Ann.
Oh, you ask your question.
Okay. Allie, you mentioned that the fund may come to the point that they will have to escort Arkansans across the border. Now, let me ask you this, because I'm not really into a lot of the understanding about how law works. If this young woman is a resident of Arkansas and she's not legally allowed to get an abortion here in Arkansas, will she encounter any sort of legalities if she leaves the state, acquires an abortion across state lines, and then comes back?
As laws are written now, no. Just like, say, before Arkansas had medical marijuana. If I had traveled to Colorado, bought a bag of weed, smoked it all while I was in Colorado, and then came back to Arkansas, there's nothing that Arkansas could do to me because I was doing something that was legal in the state I was in. Now, if I brought weed back with me, that's where the problem comes in. But if anyone crosses state, an adult, we'll say this, adult people who cross state lines to engage in activities that are legal in the state they are going to, the way laws are written now, there are no legal repercussions once they come back to Arkansas. The one exception might be if somebody was accessing medication abortion outside of Arkansas, they would take their first dose of medication likely at the clinic. And then if they choose to travel home to Arkansas and take the second dose, they basically would be bringing abortion pills into Arkansas. I imagine that could probably pose some legal risk. And in that cases, we would probably do our best to work with and encourage folks seeking medical abortion to get hotel rooms or other type of lodging to stay in the state until the abortion is complete. I personally have literally just been waiting for one of these bills to include a provision that tries to prevent adult human beings from crossing state lines to access services that are legal in other states. I am not a legal expert, but I believe that would be completely unconstitutional to say that you can't cross state lines to access something that is legal in another state. Again, as long as you're not bringing anything illegal back into the state, that shouldn't be, they shouldn't be able to outlaw that. But yeah, short answer is somebody who crosses, gets in a procedure and comes back into Arkansas, there should not be any legal repercussions for that.
The problem with that
Thank you.
is that it causes a delay in being able to get the drugs and have an abortion within the time frame of however many weeks, which just that's just unacceptable.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, I imagine that once people start having to leave the state, like have to, as I mentioned before, there are already Arkansans who leave the state to access abortion. But if it does get to the point where literally you have to leave the state to access abortion, I imagine most people will be getting the procedure, if for no other reason that they probably will get past that 10-week point where medication abortion is advisable.
I add, Allie, that's happening right now with patients that are being seen at Little Rock Family Planning from Texas.
Yeah.
They're facing that exact same scenario as they head back into their state.
Yeah. So we are already seeing it for residents of other states. And Texans are coming here, to get abortions, and they're not being sued when they get back into Texas, or because they can't be, because they accessed a legal service in this state.
Allie, on the woman, back to the stories, the woman who was shamed by her gynecologist, you said she had to come back to the Arkansas clinic because and then pay for it out of pocket. Is this just a matter of women are reluctant to switch gynecologists, or could she have switched gynecologists and gotten that done?
It's possible, although I imagine, it's been a while since I've looked for a new doctor, but the time and the effort needed to establish, find the new doctor, and having to ask up front if they provide that service, risking the continued judgment from, while absolutely it should have been possible, it probably didn't feel possible to her at the time.
Okay.
I've got a question about something that was in the news lately, the FDA okaying mail order abortion pills. Is that a terrible idea? Is it a good idea? How do you feel about that?
It's a great idea. Unfortunately, it doesn't do anything to help Arkansans because telemedicine for abortion, which would be, either I talk to a doctor over Zoom, from my home, or I go to a clinic and talk to a doctor who's located at a different clinic. They prescribe the abortion pill, and you were either able to get it from the clinic or they would mail it to you. That is banned in Arkansas. That was banned many years ago, before clinics were even thinking about doing it here. But all the evidence points to medication abortion being just as safe, and in some cases even safer than, I wouldn't say safer. All the evidence points to medication abortion being very safe, and Complications are very, very rare. And frankly, anybody who's experiencing a complication from medication abortion would follow the same exact protocol, whether they went to a clinic to get pills or whether those pills were mailed to them. The protocol is, if you're having excessive bleeding, to go to the emergency room. Obviously, that's a little problematic right now in the time of COVID, but it's not going to stop people from trying to get abortions. The abortion pill regimen is extremely safe. And after a verbal screening with a doctor who is familiar with the protocols, there is absolutely no medical reason to prevent mail order abortion pills.
But then medical reasons aren't the reason why we have abortion laws.
Exactly. Yeah, none of even the ones that they try to couch in safety don't actually do anything to increase safety or medical efficacy. It's all about putting burden on the clinics so that they might have to close down, or at minimum, they'll have to drain their own resources and potentially raise the cost of abortion. It's more hoops, it's more paperwork that the state hopes, oh, if they miss crossing a T or dotting an I, we can get them. And it's also, a lot of these laws are about shaming patients and just giving the general public an overall view, a negative view of abortion, when all the ultrasound laws were passed several years ago and they continue to be passed. That gives the general public this idea that, oh, well, were abortion providers not doing ultrasounds already? No, the vast majority of them were already performing ultrasounds. And in cases where a patient, for whatever reason, may be opposed to having a transvaginal ultrasound, there are other ways that a doctor can determine the length of a pregnancy and the location of a fetus. But with those laws in place, doctors are not able to explore those options with their patients, and the patients are stuck with legislators making decisions about medicine. Any other questions?
I'll say that when Allie sends me the links that she was going to send, I will make sure that they're posted on the video of this Zoom meeting that'll be uploaded to our YouTube channel with Jim Lindsley's help. Thank you, Jim. And thank you, Allie.
You're welcome.
Great job, Allie. All right. Well, that brings us to our concluding statements today. If you're glad that free thinkers are organizing here in Arkansas, please consider joining the Arkansas Society of Free Thinkers or getting in touch through meetup.com with us. I will show you exactly how to do that since we're in a convenient spot.
You might add that being a member or being on Facebook does not make you a member. What makes you a member is if you donate or apply for a membership, I guess is what you would say. Is that correct, Chris?
That's right. That's a very good point that a lot of people confuse, because there's, nowadays you're in a Facebook group and you feel like you're a member of a group, but that's not actually true. That doesn't really extend to real life. If you'd like to join us, the first thing to do is maybe to check out our events, which are on meetup.com/AR Freethinkers. And if you'd like to see what's going on, you click events right here and you can scroll on down and see that we've got several things going. Not as many as usual right now, but that's going to heat up a bit after the Omicron wave hopefully crashes and ends. You can also hit the calendar button and get a calendar view of the goings on. And down here, there are links that you can use, that you can plug these links into your calendar function on your computer or on your phone. You can just, copy the link and plug that into your calendar. And all of a sudden, all these events pop up on your calendar in a way that you can turn that view on and off. So that's how you get organized in a way that you can keep up with what the Arkansas Society of Free Thinkers are doing. And if you'd like to join, you can just go to arfreethinkers.org, and the donate button is right here. You can make a one-time donation, and that helps us. But we also get a decent amount of our funding from Amazon Smile. And so if you shop at smile.amazon.com instead of Amazon, it's the same website, all the same items and prices. It just forwards money to the nonprofit of your choice. And if you'd like to consider the Arkansas Society of Free Thinkers as that nonprofit, we'd appreciate you. Kroger also has a way to support the nonprofit of your choice, and you can go through their website, and we get a lot of help from there too. Really what we need most is more volunteers, more people with any kind of skill really that could help us to accomplish our big meetings, to accomplish additional meetups. If you have an idea for a meetup, whether it is a potluck this spring, or a dog walking group, or something involving exercise, or something, really any kind of thing, a book club, please get involved and get networking with people, and you'll pretty soon find some folks that are willing to do that with you through the ASF group. And also, if you would like to get in contact with us, just email info@arfreethinkers.org. Does anyone have anything before we close up for the day?
Chris, I'd like to say that Bern has a weekly hike, as a matter of fact, and Leewood Thomas, not the singer, but our very own Leewood Thomas, has a disc golf every Saturday or Sunday, well, every Saturday, and that's on Meetup as well. Both of those things are on Meetup. And occasionally, or I say occasionally, monthly, when we get out of COVID, we have a second Sunday Cantina Communion, which is very prayerful out there. And we have that at the Cantina Cinco de Mayo on Stagecoach Road every second Sunday at about 6 o'clock. And that's buy your own food, though. Sometimes we present the communion liquids, but sometimes not.
Thanks, Jim. Those are good points. And we meet every third Sunday, same time for the big meeting. And probably, I'm thinking this latest wave of COVID is high enough that we will probably be on Zoom next month, but you never know, there's a chance. But hopefully by March, we can get back to meeting up in person and in a safe way. And of course, if you haven't been vaccinated and you haven't been boosted, please go and get those things done. That just, helps things become safer so that we can get out of this Brady Bunch way of meeting and into the much more satisfying and rewarding reality. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we'll see you next month.